I don't really know where else to put this, but I need to get it out somewhere. Maybe someone will understand. Last week I invited my husband and my son to dinner. That probably doesn't sound like a big deal, except they haven't spoken in 7 years. Not since the night everything fell apart. Shouting, slammed doors, silence that lasted nearly a decade. They both blame each other, and maybe they're both right. I've spent years trying to fix it, texting one, calling the other, playing messenger like it was my full-time job. Nothing worked. They wouldn't even say each other's names anymore, so I did something I'm not proud of. I told each of them that the other had apologized. I told my husband our son wanted to make peace. I told my son his father was sorry. And then I cooked dinner. The thing is, I didn't do it out of manipulation. I did it because I'm running out of time. The doctors told me something a few months ago that I haven't shared with anyone. Not even them. And I couldn't leave this world knowing they still hated each other. I just wanted one last meal together. One night to pretend we were still a family. I thought it would be simple. Just dinner. But nothing about that night went the way I planned. I started setting the table at 3 p.m., even though dinner wasn't until 7. I know that sounds ridiculous. Who does that? But I wanted everything to be perfect. The tablecloth was the white linen one we only ever used on holidays, the one with the tiny embroidered roses my mother stitched before she passed. I ironed it twice. Then I took out the good plates that China David and I got as a wedding gift. We've never really used them. They've sat in the cabinet for decades, gathering polite dust like all the things people save for someday. Well, someday turned out to be today. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock in the hallway. I always notice it when I'm alone. It feels louder, like it's counting down to something. I made David's favorite roast, even though he'll probably complain it's too dry like he always does. And I made Ethan's apple pie, the one with the crumble topping instead of the lattice crust. He used to help me make it when he was little. He'd sneak spoonfuls of the topping before I could stop him, giggling like a thief. I still make it the same way, even now that he's 30 and we barely speak. I took the pie out of the oven and set it on the counter to cool. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and nostalgic. For a moment, I let myself pretend it was years ago when Ethan still lived here, and the three of us would eat together, laugh about stupid things, before everything fell apart. But the pretending only lasted a second. I caught sight of the hospital envelope on the counter, the one I'd been avoiding all morning, and the weight of it came crashing back. It's funny how something so small can carry so much power. Just a single piece of paper with neat black letters spelling out words like terminal and stage 4. That envelope changed everything. When the doctor told me, I didn't cry. I just nodded, like he'd told me my car needed new tires. I think part of me already knew. I'd been so tired, the kind of tired that doesn't go away with sleep. But it wasn't until that word, terminal, that I realized I was running out of time. Not just time to live, but time to fix things. Time to make things right. That's what tonight is about. Fixing things. I called David first. I didn't know how to start the conversation. What do you even say to a man who's been your husband for 30 years, but has felt like a stranger for 10? I told him I wanted to have a nice dinner, just the three of us, like old times. He immediately asked if Ethan would be there. I could hear the stiffness in his voice. When I said yes, there was a long pause. Then he sighed and said, "Why now?" And I lied. I told him Ethan had reached out, that he wanted to make amends. I said Ethan had been thinking a lot lately, and he was sorry for the things he said years ago. David didn't believe me at first. I could hear it in the silence. But then he said, if he's man enough to apologize, I'll be there. Then I called Ethan, my sweet stubborn boy. I told him Dad wanted to apologize, that he regretted everything. There was a pause on his end too, but for a different reason. I could hear the years of hurt in his voice, softened only by that familiar tenderness he still saves for me. For you, Mom, he said, I'll come. When I hung up, I just sat there staring at the phone for a long time. The guilt hit almost immediately, the kind of guilt that sits in your chest like a hot stone. I hate lying, but what else could I do? They wouldn't come if I told them the truth, and the truth is this, I don't have much time left. I haven't told them yet. I can't. Not until I've seen them in the same room again, not until I know they'll have each other when I'm gone. So I set the table, arranged the silverware just so, folded the napkins into little triangles like I used to when Ethan was a kid. He'd always tease me, say no one cared about napkins. Maybe he was right, but tonight I do. It's the details that make it feel real, that make it feel like home again. While I was lighting the candles, I caught my reflection in the window. The light from the flame flickered against the glass, and for a second I didn't recognize myself. My hair's thinner now, my cheeks a little hollow. I looked like someone fading out of a photograph, but there was something steady in my eyes, something I haven't seen in a long time. Determination, maybe, or peace. I went to the living room to make sure everything was in place. The photo albums were stacked neatly on the coffee table. I'd taken one out earlier, the one from Ethan's 12th birthday. There's a picture of the three of us laughing, cake smeared on Ethan's nose, David's arm slung around us both. I used to look at that photo and wonder how everything could have gone so wrong so fast. Now I just look at it and hope they'll remember that version of us someday. The clock struck 6. My stomach twisted, not from hunger but nerves. I kept pacing from the kitchen to the dining room, checking everything again even though I knew it was fine. I straightened the cutlery, wiped imaginary smudges off the glasses, adjusted the candles a fraction of an inch. I whispered to the empty room, "Please, just one good night." That's all I'm asking. I know this might blow up in my face. They might walk out angry at me for lying, for meddling. Maybe they won't forgive me. But I'd rather go knowing I tried than leave this world with them still hating each other. It's strange. I'm more afraid of dying with unfinished business than I am of dying itself. I checked the roast one last time, pulled the pie closer to the window so it could cool faster, and smoothed down the tablecloth again. Then I sat down and waited. The clock kept ticking, louder now, counting down the hours. Dinner for 3, that's all I want. Just one dinner before it's too late. I don't know what I was expecting when the doorbell rang. Maybe a miracle, maybe silence, maybe both. It was David who arrived first, right on time, because of course he did. He's punctual to a fault, always has been. The kind of man who sets his watch 5 minutes fast so he's never late. I heard his car pull into the driveway and felt my heart start to hammer in my chest. By the time the doorbell rang, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the serving spoon. When I opened the door, he stood there in that stiff grey jacket he wears for occasions, holding a bottle of wine like a peace offering. Or maybe a shield. He looked good, older of course, but still solid. The same strong jaw, the same careful posture. But there was something about his eyes that startled me. They looked tired, not just from age, but from carrying years of bitterness like luggage he'd forgotten how to put down. "Smells good," he said, stepping past me. It wasn't really a compliment, more like an observation. He looked around the house as if he'd walked into a museum exhibit about his own life. Everything was familiar yet distant. I watched him pause by the photos on the wall, the ones of Ethan as a boy. He stared a little longer at one in particular. Ethan at 16, smiling awkwardly, his arm slung around me while David stood off to the side. That photo was taken a week before the fight. Before the silence. "Dinner's almost ready," I said too brightly. "Make yourself at home." He nodded, still looking around, and said quietly, "It hasn't changed much." "Neither have you," I said, though I wasn't sure if it was true. We made small talk on the weather, his job, the neighbors. The usual polite nothings. I kept glancing at the clock. Ethan was supposed to be here 15 minutes ago. I tried not to let my voice shake when I said, "He'll be here soon." David just grunted and poured himself a glass of wine without asking. Some habits die hard. And then the sound I'd been waiting for, tires crunching in the driveway. My heart actually skipped. I wiped my hands on my apron even though they were clean. Ethan stood on the porch when I opened the door, looking older, thinner. His hair was longer than I remembered, his clothes casual. City casual, not small-town casual. He was holding a bottle of wine too. Apparently guilt and awkwardness both come wrapped in Merlot. "Hey, Mom," he said softly. My throat tightened. "Hey, baby." He smiled at the word baby but didn't correct me. For a second, just a second, I saw the little boy who used to chase fireflies in the backyard, and then behind me I heard a voice. "Well, he actually came." Ethan froze. David was standing in the hallway, glass in hand, his tone sharp enough to slice through the room. Ethan looked at me, confused, wary. "You didn't say he'd be here already." "I wanted it to be a surprise," I said, forcing a smile I didn't feel. He stared at me for a long moment, then at his father. "Yeah, surprise." The air in the room thickened, heavy and charged. Ethan set his bottle down a little too hard on the table. David's jaw tightened. I could practically feel the tension crawling up the walls like smoke. "Let's sit," I said quickly. "Dinner's ready." I led them to the dining room like a referee leading two fighters into the ring. The roast sat perfectly in the center of the table, steaming and golden. The candles flickered beautifully. Everything looked exactly how I wanted it to, except the people. They sat across from each other in silence. Forks clinked against plates. No one ate much. I tried to fill the quiet with small talk. Work, weather, old friends, but my words just floated into the void between them. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "So you're still in the same job, huh?" David looked up sharply. "Still paying the bills. Someone has to." Ethan gave a tight smile. "Yeah, I remember that line. I felt it coming, the argument, the years of resentment bubbling under the surface." My stomach turned to stone. David put down his fork. "Your mother said you wanted to talk." Ethan blinked. "What?" "She said you wanted to apologize. To make peace." Ethan's eyebrows knit together. "Apologize?" "She told me you wanted to apologize." And there it was. The moment the match hit the fuse, they both turned to me at once, eyes like mirrors of betrayal. "Mom," Ethan said slowly. "What's he talking about?" I couldn't find words. My hands trembled in my lap. David leaned back in his chair, disgusted. "You lied to us." I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. The silence was deafening. Finally, I said quietly, "I just wanted to see you both in the same room again. You thought tricking us was the way to do that." Ethan's voice cracked between anger and heartbreak. David stood up, pacing. "Jesus, Margaret. Do you have any idea? Yes, I said sharply, I do. I know exactly what I did. For a moment no one spoke. The candles flickered between us like nervous witnesses. I just wanted one dinner, I whispered. One night where we could be a family again. Ethan looked at me, his anger faltering. David's hand clenched around his glass. I saw something shift in both of them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but confusion. Maybe even fear. Finally, Ethan sat back down. Fine, he muttered. Let's eat. And just like that, the performance resumed. Forks moved. Plates shifted. No one met anyone's eyes. The house felt smaller, tighter. But beneath the tension, there was something else. Something alive. Anger is still a kind of connection. It's not peace, but it's not silence either. As I watched them across the table, my husband, my son, I realized I'd done it. They were both here. They were angry, but they were here. And for tonight, that was enough. I don't know why I thought the hard part would be getting them in the same room. Turns out the hard part is keeping them there. The silence at the table had weight to it. You could almost hear it. The sound of things unsaid pressing against the walls. The clink of cutlery, the scrape of a chair, the faint hum of the refrigerator. All of it felt too loud, too sharp. I tried to talk, tried to bridge the space between them. I asked Ethan about his job in the city. I asked David about the new manager at his office. They both answered in half sentences that trailed off like smoke. It was like throwing pebbles into a canyon and never hearing them hit the bottom. At one point I caught David glancing at Ethan's hands, tattooed now, a new one peeking from under his sleeve. His expression tightened, that familiar look of judgment flickering behind his eyes. He didn't say anything, but he didn't have to. I could feel the disapproval radiating from him. Ethan noticed, of course. He always notices. It's just ink, Dad, he said flatly. David didn't look up. I didn't say anything. You didn't have to, and there it was, the crack in the dam. Small at first, but widening. David took a sip of wine and said, "Still the same temper." Ethan laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Still the same condescension. Watch it, or what?" "Enough," I said, a little too quickly, a little too softly. They both turned to me, almost startled, like they'd forgotten I was even there. I tried to steady my voice. "Can we please just talk? Like normal people?" David gave a short, bitter laugh. "Normal people don't get ambushed into fake apologies. Normal people don't walk out on their families either," Ethan shot back. The air seemed to thicken, hot and electric. I felt it coming. The eruption I'd been dreading since the moment I made those phone calls. David slammed his fork down. "You were 23, Ethan. 23. You think the world owed you something? I gave you everything I could. And you threw it back in my face because you didn't like being told what to do." Ethan's eyes blazed. "You didn't give me everything. You controlled everything, every choice, every step. You made me feel like nothing I did was good enough unless it was your idea." "That's not true," David said. But it was softer this time, defensive. "Oh, it's true," Ethan said, leaning forward. "You think I wanted to leave? You think I wanted to walk away from Mom? I did it because I couldn't breathe in this house. I wanted to stop them, to shout, to cry, to make it stop, but part of me couldn't move. Maybe some cruel part of me needed to hear it all, to let them bleed the poison out." The argument spiraled. Every old wound was reopened. Every decade-old resentment pulled back into the light. David brought up the time Ethan quit his engineering program. Ethan fired back about the way David belittled him at the graduation dinner. Their voices overlapped, each word another cut. Finally I snapped. "Stop it!" The word tore out of me louder than I intended. It startled even me. My hands were trembling. The room went still. I stood up, feeling my heartbeat in my throat. "Do you hear yourselves? You're still fighting like it's that night, like nothing's changed." David started to speak, but I raised a hand. "No, no more excuses. You both think you were the victim. But do you know who actually suffered? Me, I've been in the middle of this for 7 years. So I've missed birthdays, holidays, whole pieces of my life because you two couldn't swallow your pride." Ethan's face softened. "Mom, I thought if I could just get you to sit down together again, maybe you'd remember who you were before the anger." Before the silence, my voice cracked. "I just wanted my family back." No one spoke. The only sound was the faint hiss of the candles burning low. David looked at his plate, shame flickering across his face. Ethan's eyes glistened, but he looked away. I sat back down slowly, suddenly aware of how tired I was. The tension didn't vanish, but it changed shape. It wasn't hot anymore. It was heavy, almost mournful. Ethan pushed his plate away and said quietly, "I didn't walk out because I hated you." "Dad, I walked out because I didn't know how to stay," David exhaled. Like something inside him finally cracked too. "And I let you go because I didn't know how to stop you." It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was something. A beginning. I should have felt relief, but instead I felt dizzy. A wave of exhaustion hit me, sudden and deep like I'd been holding my breath all night. I pressed a hand to my chest and tried to steady myself. The room tilted a little. "Mom?" Ethan's voice sounded far away. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Just tired." "I've been up all day cooking." David's eyes narrowed. "You don't look fine," I forced a smile. "It's nothing. Please, let's just—" But my words trailed off. I couldn't finish the sentence. I stood, meaning to clear the plates, but the motion sent another wave of dizziness through me. My vision blurred around the edges. The sound of their voices blended together, distant, panicked. "Mom, sit down," Ethan said, but I didn't make it to the chair. The last thing I remember is the crash of a plate hitting the floor, and both of them shouting my name. Then everything went quiet. When I came to, the world was blurred and full of light. It wasn't the kind of light that comforts. It was sterile, humming, too white, the kind that burns the edges of everything. For a second, I didn't know where I was. I thought maybe I'd fallen asleep at the table. I tried to move, but there were tubes, wires, something tight around my wrist. My throat felt raw, then I heard a sound, a soft, rhythmic. A machine beeping, a hospital, and then the voices, familiar ones, low and strained. Her blood pressure's stabilizing, someone said. A nurse, maybe. Another voice, one that cracked halfway through the sentence. Gerta whispered, "Thank God, Ethan." I tried to open my eyes, but the light was too harsh. I caught fragments instead, shadows moving. Someone's hand on mine, the faint scent of David's cologne, the same one he's worn since our wedding day. I wanted to say something, to tell them I was fine, to ask how long I'd been out. But my mouth was dry and my tongue felt heavy. So I just listened, Ethan's voice again, quieter this time. "She's going to wake up, right?" "She's strong," David said. His tone was flat, but underneath it, fear. The nurse murmured something I couldn't make out. Then footsteps. A door closing. Silence except for the beeping. When I finally forced my eyes open, the first thing I saw was David sitting on my right, his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. He looked smaller. Not physically, but somehow deflated. Like a balloon that's been holding air for too long and finally let go. Ethan was on my left, slumped in the chair, his head in his hands. His shoulders were shaking. "Hey," I croaked. Two heads snapped up at once. "Mom!" Ethan was at my side instantly, grabbing my hand like a child again. His eyes were red, his cheeks blotchy. "Jesus, Mom, you scared us." David stood too, slower, hesitant. "You fainted," he said. "I've been out for hours." Hours. I tried to smile, but my face felt stiff. Guess the roast was too much for me. No one laughed. The silence that followed wasn't angry this time. It was fragile, like something new that could break if you breathed too hard. Ethan squeezed my hand. "Why didn't you tell us?" I looked between them. My son, my husband, both exhausted, both broken open in their own ways. "I didn't want tonight to be about me," I said. My voice sounded small. "I just wanted to see you two together again." "Mom?" Ethan's voice cracked. "You shouldn't have had to lie to do that." I nodded weakly. "You're right. But if I hadn't, would you have come?" Neither of them answered. I looked at David. "You wouldn't have come," he didn't argue. His eyes glistened, and something I hadn't seen in years. "You should have told us, Margaret." "About the cancer." "About everything." I swallowed hard. "I couldn't not like that. Not when you both were still at war." He looked away, jaw clenched. Ethan leaned back in his chair, wiping at his eyes. "I thought if I could get you to talk," I said softly. "Then maybe I could go in peace knowing you wouldn't be alone." That was it, the truth. Naked and trembling in the air, Ethan stood up suddenly, pacing the small space. "Don't talk like that. You're not—" He stopped himself, then started again, quieter. "You're not going anywhere." I smiled faintly. "Honey, I'm already halfway gone." He shook his head violently. "No, I won't let you." David reached out then, not to stop Ethan, but to steady him. His hand landed awkwardly on his son's shoulder, unsure. The gesture was small, but it cracked something open between them. Ethan froze, then looked up at him. "You knew, didn't you?" he asked. "You must have seen she wasn't well." David's voice broke. "I saw her getting tired, yes, but she wouldn't talk about it. I didn't want to face it." Their eyes met, not with anger, but with something quieter. Grief, maybe, understanding. I watched them and thought, this is what I wanted. Not forgiveness. Not a miracle, just this. Two people finally seeing each other. The nurse came in to check my vitals. She smiled politely, but I could tell she'd seen this kind of scene before. The aftermath. The apologies, the hands gripping each other like lifelines. When she left, the room fell silent again. David sat back down beside me. "Do you need anything?" I shook my head. "Just stay," he nodded. "We will." Ethan sank into the chair again, leaning his head against the bed rail. "Remember when we used to watch movies after dinner?" he said suddenly. "Popcorn bad comedies, you two falling asleep halfway through?" I laughed weakly. "We never finished a single movie." David smiled for the first time that night. "You always picked the ones with talking dogs?" "Because you hated them," I whispered. "It was fun to annoy you." We laughed at all three of us, softly, like we were remembering the same warm room from long ago. For a few moments it felt like we were back there again. Before everything cracked, Ethan reached over and took his father's hand without looking at him. David didn't pull away. I closed my eyes, listening to the steady rhythm of their breathing. The beeping of the monitor became less mechanical, almost comforting, like a metronome keeping time with the moment. I didn't know how much time I had left, but for the first time in years I didn't feel afraid. I felt finished. Not in a tragic way, just whole. Like the pieces had finally found each other again. As I drifted towards sleep, I heard Ethan whisper, "We'll be okay, Mum, I promise." David's voice followed, low and rough. "We'll take care of each other." And I thought, finally, they're speaking the same language. I'm writing this from the kitchen table. The same table, the one with the faint burn mark from when Ethan was 12 and tried to make pancakes on his own. The one where David paid bills, where I folded laundry, where birthday candles once melted down too fast because someone was laughing too hard to blow them out. It's quiet now. No machines beeping, no arguing, no voices layered with decades of resentment. Just the tick of that hallway clock again. The one that never lets me forget time is still moving, even when I feel like I'm not. It's been 2 weeks since the hospital. I'm home again, weak but grateful. They wanted me to start another round of treatment, but I said no. I've made peace with what's coming. The doctors looked at me the way people do when they don't understand peace, like it's just another word for giving up. It isn't. It's something softer. It's letting go of the fight so you can actually live in what's left. Ethan's been staying here. He sleeps on the couch most nights, even though I told him to take his old room. The first night, I woke up at 3 in the morning and found him sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in a blanket, staring out into the dark. I didn't say anything. I just sat beside him. After a while he said, "I forgot how quiet it gets here." I told him the quiet is what makes you notice the good sounds, the birds before sunrise, the way the wind moves through the trees, the hum of the fridge that somehow feels like company. He smiled and leaned his head on my shoulder. I think he finally understood. David comes every evening. He brings groceries I don't need and fusses over things I can still do myself, replacing light bulbs, trimming the hedges, checking the smoke alarm. I let him. It's his way of saying sorry. Sometimes he'll stay for dinner, and the 3 of us will eat together again. Dinner for 3, only now it means something different. There's no pretending anymore, no lies, just us, raw and human and trying. Last night we had soup. Simple, nothing special. Tomato and grilled cheese. David cut the sandwiches into triangles just like I used to. He was clumsy with the knife but proud of himself. Ethan teased him for burning the bread, and instead of snapping back, David laughed. It was the smallest, purest sound. I hadn't heard that laugh in years. I thought about how much of life is made of these tiny, invisible mercies. One soft laugh, one unguarded moment, and how easily we throw them away. After dinner, I excused myself and let them talk. I could hear them from the hallway. Low voices, serious but calm. Not the old kind of fighting. This was something gentler. They were building a new language between them, one I didn't need to translate anymore. I lay in bed listening to their murmur fade into the night. I realized then that the house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt full again. This morning I woke before sunrise. The light coming through the curtains was soft, like water. I made coffee, half a cup. That's all I can manage these days, and sat at the kitchen table with my notebook. The chair across from me is empty. It will be empty for them too soon enough, but that's okay. Empty doesn't mean gone. It means there's space for memory. Sometimes I think about that dinner, the night I collapsed. It plays in my head like a film on an old projector, jumpy and grainy. But when I remember it now, it's not the fight I see. It's the way their faces looked in the ambulance side by side, both terrified of losing me, but maybe more terrified of losing each other again. That fear became love before they even noticed. If I could freeze one moment in time, it would be that. The 2 of them realizing what really mattered. Ethan's voice carries down the hall now. He's on the phone with someone from work, telling them he's staying here a while longer. David's out back trimming the rose bushes. I can hear the snip of the shears and the occasional muttered curse when he hits a thorn. Ordinary sounds, precious ones. I know they're both doing it for me, staying, helping, but I hope they keep doing it for each other when I'm gone. That's the point of all this, to leave them with a table that's still set, even if one chair stays empty. I don't believe in grand endings. I believe in dishes drying on the rack, in half-drunk cups of tea and laughter that lingers after the joke. That's where love hides. Not in the dramatic moments, but in the leftovers of everyday life. Maybe that's what family really is. The people who keep showing up for dinner, even when it hurts. Later today, they're going to cook, David insisted. You're not lifting a finger, he said. Ethan found one of my old recipe cards. Chicken and dumplings, faded ink. My handwriting looping and uneven from when I was pregnant with him. They're going to try to follow it. I already know they'll mess up the salt, argue about the timing, make a mess of my kitchen. I also know it'll be perfect. Because it's theirs now. When they sit down to eat, I'll probably excuse myself, say I need to rest. I'll let them talk. That's how it should be. Them finding their rhythm without me in the middle. I'll hear their voices through the door, warm and alive, and I'll smile knowing the fight is finally over. And one day after I'm gone, maybe they'll still make that meal. Maybe Ethan will bring his own family. Maybe David will tell stories about when we were young. Maybe they'll both laugh about how terrible that first dinner was, the night everything broke, so that it could finally begin to heal. I like to think they'll light candles, not out of sadness but out of habit. I like to think they'll leave my chair where it is, not to mourn me, just to remember that love once shared doesn't vanish. It lingers, like the smell of apple pie long after the oven's off, and maybe, if there's anything of me left in the air, I'll be sitting right there between them, listening, smiling, finally full. Dinner for three, always.